I'm going to start with a few very simple definitions. The first one is that literacy in many English-dominant countries, like Australia, the United States, Canada, South Africa, to a certain extent the United Kingdom, New Zealand, is often associated only or mainly with English. So although languages teachers know that literacy is a really important aspect of language teaching, somehow or other, for the last 20 years, most of the focus on literacy has been within the English language curriculum, and there has been a de-emphasis on literacy in the languages curriculum, a de-emphasis on explicit focus on literacy in the languages curriculum. This is an international trend. It is not something that is unique to Australia, but this is something that has happened. So in other words, our eye has been taken off the role of literacy in languages teaching. Biliteracy has become a really significant feature of languages teaching and learning in the United States. And there are now about 36 states which have something that they offer students at the end of secondary school, which is a certificate or a seal of biliteracy proficiency. So a great deal of emphasis is coming back in the United States, for example, in relation to developing biliteracy expertise. Biliteracy is often also associated with students who come into the school who already have literacy in their home language and they are developing literacy in English. Or it can be related to students who are literate in English and they are developing their literacy in an additional language. Multilingual literacy is literacy in more than two languages. Here what we're trying to do is just give you a sort of a diagrammatic idea of what we're trying to talk about. The focus in our of this particular workshop and key idea is to look at the transfer of literacy expertise from one language to another. So because you are all languages teachers, you are in fact working at least with a context of biliteracy. For those of you who know that your students also have literacy in a home language, or those students might be learning more than having 2 or 3 languages in the school, are working with students who are developing their multilingual literacy. And what we're trying to do is to ensure that we maximize the opportunities to build on whatever literacy expertise students bring into the classroom from the home. We add what the mainstream literacy focus is in the schools, which is of course English, and we try in our languages teaching to recognize the kinds of literacy that students bring in English and also possibly their home language or language of faith. So we are looking at a continua and transfer of literacy from home language to English to additional language. We might also look at this as a continua, not just of literacy in the way that we normally think of, or many people normally think of literacy as reading and writing, is that it's a big continuum of building on the spoken language, hearing language, visual language, signed language. It's building on a bed of language that students are exposed to. So we talk about early or emergent literacy. We also talk about oral language or oracy. And there's a very interesting quotation, if one can imagine this situation: reading and writing float on a sea of talk. And this talk, of course, can be signed talk. It doesn't have to be spoken talk. It builds also on phonological awareness for students who are hearing students. It focuses on and builds on decoding the written text and encoding the written text. It focuses also on vocabulary building and corpus development. So it's about building up a body of vocabulary, but also the structure of the language. So it's about the grammatical structure of each language which is being taught. It moves towards reading with meaning. And reading with meaning can be silent reading, but it can also be reading aloud. It moves on towards fluency in reading, and fluency in reading also relates to the speed at which one is able to read and understand text. Because if one has fragile reading capabilities, one is unable to really understand written text if one can't remember the point of the sentence. So if you start reading a sentence and it takes one too long to get to the end of the sentence, one loses track of the actual point of the sentence, and then one loses track of the point of the text, the whole text that one's reading. So fluency involves speed and automaticity of reading with comprehension. And it, of course, also relates to writing, and writing can relate to including thoughts, feelings, and thinking independently. Now, there are two phases of literacy development that we need to be very aware of. Usually in the first 3 to 4 years of learning to read, the focus is on learning to read. But literacy continues beyond the first 3 or 4 years of school to the point that reading and writing is necessary in order to learn. So the shift from learning to read and then reading and writing in order to learn is a really important shift to understand. The job of teaching literacy does not end around about year 3 or 4. It continues and it shifts and it becomes more and more complex.